Hi, okay, hello everybody. This is Wendy Stimson, one of the owners of Passel Estate, and I'm back for this month's live stream wine chat and wine tasting. It is just me again, I'm afraid, not Barry. He's currently serving his quarantine, having just come back from the vineyard into Singapore. He's serving it at home, but we still have to keep our distance. Although I have been able to deliver to him a glass of each of the wines I'm going to taste today. So hopefully you'll see his comments and his thoughts in the comment stream from the other room as we're talking through this. So welcome very much. Oh, and thank you. I've got some hearts already. That's nice. Please do send me lots of likes and hearts so that I know you're out there. And obviously your comments. Let me know what you're drinking, what your thoughts are. I do realise that we've chosen International Cabernet Day to do a comparison of a Syrah Shiraz wine varietal, which might seem a little bit perverse of us. To be honest, we didn't realise when we planned this that it was going to be coinciding with International Cabernet Day. But equally, I think it's a really fun thing to do, and you know, comparing the impact of the terroir on a Margaret River wine versus a Barossa wine is a really fun comparison. And you know, the Barossa Shiraz is certainly full-bodied enough to hold its own against a fine Cabernet. So hopefully you've opened something delicious, and you can tell me what it is and what your thoughts are as we go through. I guess as I'm pouring the wines, and the Passel Estate example is our Shiraz, our core Shiraz, I'll talk a little bit about what's inspired this tasting session today, and that's something that we've always offered at the tasting room, and we've just relaunched it in a new exciting form, and that's our unique Provenance Unearthed tasting. It's a guided tasting, takes you through 6 beautiful wines, a Chardonnay, a Shiraz, and a Cabernet, and we taste the Passel Estate range of those 3 varietals alongside beautiful examples from other famous wine regions in Australia. So we have a Mornington Peninsula Chardonnay currently that we taste and discuss alongside our Passel Estate Margaret River Chardonnay. We have a Barossa Shiraz, of course, that we taste and discuss alongside our Margaret River Shiraz or Syrah. We also make the reserve Syrah, as I'm sure most of you know. And we taste a lovely Coonawarra example of a Cabernet Sauvignon alongside our Margaret River Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's a really fun, educational but fun tasting experience. And now that we have the Caravan, you can even opt, if you wish, to add our 2 reserve Cabernet and reserve Syrah to the tasting. So adds a little bit more comparison and complexity to the afternoon. So today I'm not going to do all of that, especially because I'm on my own, of course. But we thought it would be really fun to do a little bit of a taster with our Shiraz and compare and discuss the differences with a beautiful example that I'll be opening shortly from the Barossa. Oh, hi Barry, he's online, so he's saying hello, and hopefully we'll have some people joining us soon and including their comments today as well. So I guess another reason why we talk about the Provenance Unearthed being one of our staple guided tastings in the tasting room is because terroir and the influence of place on the wines is something that's very close to our heart and our philosophy at Passel Estate. I think many of you that are familiar with us and with our wines know that what we're striving to do with every single wine that we produce is give you a sense of Passel Estate and that beautiful little patch of paradise we happen to be stewards of in the heart of the Margaret River wine region. And so Provenance Unearthed really sort of celebrates that by looking at different wines that express really well where they come from, and explaining how the same grape can taste so very different depending on that terroir, that place. Terroir meaning everything, the whole ecosystem, if you like, that's gone into producing that wine. It's the climate, of course, the ground, the earth, and you know, the stylistic intent and what the people, the winemakers and the viticulturists and the producers behind the wines are hoping to achieve in their wine. And so that whole sort of variety of things that go into producing the lovely wine in your glass and will hopefully express itself in the content of what you drink. So it's a really good fun way of exploring that and comparing the differences outside of the Passel Estate expressions that you come and enjoy in our estate. So I guess Shiraz or Syrah, as you both names, as I'm sure you all know, are equally valid. It's the same grape. Syrah is the traditional name in France, and particularly what is considered to be the home of Syrah, or Shiraz as a varietal, which is the Rhone Valley. And certainly one of our influences because of the nature of our climate and the stylistic intent that we have at Passel Estate. That certainly influences what we try to make. And so Syrah is really just the French name, and sometimes when it's used in Australia, is implying that kind of stylistic approach. So again, we have a Shiraz on our bottle, but in our reserve, we actually call it Syrah, the Lot 71 Reserve Syrah. It's the same grape, but we're just trying to flag a little bit more on the face of our label what we're trying to achieve in the way we've made our wine. And so Shiraz, of course, is the New World name for the grape, very traditionally associated with Australia in particular, and of course the Barossa Valley, where it was, I guess, largely pioneered in the 1800s. And so there you are. It can be used to signal a different stylistic intent, but it's the same grape. And Shiraz is a cool grape. I love it. It's delicate. It's pretty. It requires a lot of tender love and care in the vineyard, which is why I love it so much. We don't want it to blister. It's got thin skins on the grapes. We want it to ripen really consistently and beautifully across the whole row and the block, so we can produce a really beautiful and consistent wine at the end of the day. And because of these sort of delicacies and characteristics of the grape, it is a varietal that particularly does express its terroir and where it comes from. So it's absolutely fascinating, I think, how different you will find a Passel Estate example of a Shiraz with a really big, well-known, robust Barossa Shiraz. So I'm talking and talking. I should probably move on and start tasting this wine. Hopefully you've all got a glass of something yummy with you. If anybody is drinking Shiraz or Syrah and from different regions, it'd be really good to hear from you and see your views on the terroir that's speaking to you in your glass. But as we move forward, we're going to start with the Passel Estate example. It's the lighter example, and we do want to move from the lighter wines through to the heavier wines when we're doing a tasting like this. So here it is, our beautiful Passel Estate Shiraz. Really fruity on the nose, absolutely fruity on the nose, as you'd expect, because all our wines are very fruit forward, but particularly we're trying to achieve that with our style of Shiraz. And of course, our climate really lends itself to that. Hi, Stefan, thank you for joining us. And you've got a Margaret River Shiraz there too, excellent. Our cooler climate, we've got the maritime influences stopping us from having those really high heat spikes that you might have in the Barossa, for example, mean that we have really quite steady, long, cool ripening periods, compared again with the Barossa, which is very hot, very dry continental climate, gets very ripe very quickly. Our fruit is much slower ripening, and that does lend itself to preserving all those lovely fruit fragrances and aromatics. And our winemaking stylistic intent with Bruce and Remy, our fabulous winemakers, is to preserve all of that beautiful fragrant fruitiness in our wine. So everything about how we make it and how we harvest it is designed to really capitalise on that beautiful climatic advantage, I would say, because of what we're trying to make, but difference from the Barossa. So we've got the cooler influences, meaning we have this very aromatic grape at the end of it, and you can smell that in our Shiraz. It's really very fruity on the nose. A little bit sort of red curranty on the nose, maybe. We also, because we're trying to really preserve those aromatics, we choose to make our Shiraz with a very careful approach. We have the whole berry ferment, so we're not splitting the berries at all. We're just taking the whole berries and letting them break down naturally in the fermentation process. So that's a more controlled, slower extraction of those tannins, which results, of course, in the lovely, silky, softer tannins that you might associate with the Margaret River style of Shiraz than the stronger, firmer tannins that you might typically get from the more ripe fruit that is grown in the Barossa because of their climate. And that also lends itself to the subtler French oak treatment that we use. So it's all French oak that we use. We use the bigger puncheons, the 500-litre puncheons. So, of course, there's a much gentler uptake of the oak into the wine, and the French oak is traditionally a nice, subtle oak to use. And we source our big puncheons that we use for the Shiraz and for the Syrah from the Vosges forests, and I'm probably mispronouncing it as always when I try and speak French. But it's a typical wood that you would find the winemakers in the Rhone Valley using for their wines, for similar reasons to why we do it, because of the intention behind what they're trying to achieve. compare and contrast with the fruit that you get in Barossa, in that hot, very ripe condition. Traditionally, although it is true that I think some of the winemakers are moving into a slightly lighter style more recently, but traditionally that's really lent itself to a much bigger oak treatment. And as a result, you find more of the Barossa winemakers using American oak, either with some French oak as well, or exclusively, because the American oak is, I guess, it's got a toastier characteristic. It's less subtle, a bolder impact on the wine, and that suits what they're trying to deliver in the Barossa, even though we're starting, as I said, from the very same grape. It's absolutely amazing. So look, I'm talking and talking and talking. Let me taste our lovely Margaret River Shiraz. And Stepan, you taste yours and let me know what you think as well. Oh yeah, it's just fruity. It's just, it is yummy. I think it's a little bit, what is it, red currants maybe? It's fruity, it's light. I'm always calling our wines, but particularly our Shiraz, feminine, as compared with some of the other wines, and I would certainly call a Barossa Shiraz masculine. They're big boys. This is a very feminine, gentle, fruity, yummy wine. A bit of tannin there, but it's still soft and lovely and silky. A bit of vanilla. And a bit of pepper, really gentle sort of white pepper. All of which is, of course, very typical of a Shiraz. The grape itself has that sort of spicy, peppery characteristic to it. Stepan's having a very similar tasting to mine. That's interesting. So he's obviously enjoying a similar experience. Hopefully you're drinking one of ours, Stepan. That would be nice. So everything that we've tried to do, which is let this wine really tell you where it's come from, tell you where our grapes are grown, tell you about our lovely climate with those cooling sea breezes just down the road from the estate, how we make it with the whole berry ferment and the beautiful gentle use of oak. That's all very present in this glass. So let's compare it, shall we, with a Barossa. So I'm in Singapore, so I went to the Mumba wine shop, which also stocks Passel Estate, if anyone's ever interested in popping out and buying a bottle on the way home from work. And I have been advised by Augustin, the proprietor, that the Charles Simaki is a lovely example of a Barossa. Oh, that's my phone. Could somebody turn my phone off for me? Thank you. Sorry. It's a lovely example of a Barossa, so hopefully he's right, and we'll see how we go. Yum. Interesting, actually. Let me just pause here, because I'm fascinated by all of these things. Look at the bottle. Compare that to our bottle. And this is something, can you see in the camera? Something that I find really interesting. In the Barossa, I daren't say everybody, because I don't know if that's true, but I think everyone I've seen, everything I can think of, a Shiraz produced by a winemaker in the Barossa or a producer in the Barossa, they tend to use these masculine bottles as well, these claret bottles. And I don't know why. I don't know if that's because traditionally they were blending it a little bit with some of the Cabernet, influenced by some of what was initially happening in the Rhone, of course, Grange being a prime example, or what. But they seem to use this bottle, and Passel Estate, along with quite a few of our colleagues in Margaret River, have chosen the Burgundy style bottle to present our Shiraz, which of course is a nod to the Rhone style, much more typical of what you would see in Rhone. So again, I think it's quite interesting that even the shape of the bottle is giving you a clue as to what might be inside when you come to taste it. So I think it's interesting anyway. Had lots of fun choosing our bottles when we first launched Passel Estate. So and of course the nose is so different. Hang on, let me calm down. A very different nose. It's really not fruity on the nose. It's got some. What's it got there? It's is it possible to smell chocolate? I mean, I don't know. My palate's a bit weird, but to me, I can smell chocolate and the spice, of course. More spicy, less pepper, more spice than the Passel Estate example that we had before. And I guess really ripe fruit, really. And again, as I've already explained, this is because it is really ripe fruit when it's made. I mean, they've got a really warm climate. It's drier. Things ripen more quickly, and stylistically, I think the winemakers in the Barossa are striving for a jammier style. They like that fruity, bold, rich style, and you can smell it here. It's like strawberry jam, I think, if you ask me. And so, yeah, again, as I said, reflecting the terroir beautifully, really, really nice. Oh, and Barry's obviously saying, he's obviously tasting the same thing, saying the same, very jammy. Oh, it's nice. It isn't. It's different. I mean, you cannot believe that this is the same grape. It really fascinates me, as you can probably tell. It's very smooth. It's got a bit of age on it. This particular bottle that I bought for today. It's bigger, obviously a more powerful wine, which you would expect, again, because that's what the Barossa is striving for, and it's also what the climate lends itself to. And terroir, I mean, I mentioned earlier, also talks about the soils, and we have very consistent gravelly loam and granite in Margaret River. Actually, Barossa, that has all sorts of varietal in its soil, so this is very much more about the climate, I think, and the stylistic intent of the winemakers and the oak use than the soil that's influencing this big, powerful, full-bodied example of a Shiraz. It's more savoury, for sure. It's more savoury. You've got some of the herbs in there and the bay leaves and things that, some people say they can taste in hours, but to me, when I tasted that earlier just now, it was really all about the fruit. Whereas this is a bit more herbaceous, a bit more savoury, and maybe that's the oak as well. It's definitely got a much more present oak, but still beautifully balanced, as you would hope and expect from a really fine wine. But it's such a contrast, such a stylistic contrast to the Passel Estate example, and because of all the reasons I've just been going on about, because of where it comes from and because of what we're trying to do versus what this winemaker is trying to do. And of course, I don't actually know, I'm afraid, I'm sorry, I don't know how this particular Shiraz was made, but there's a high probability that this winemaker is using some American oak, if not all American oak. Traditionally, certainly Charles Simicky has done. I don't know about this particular vintage, but it's traditional to do so, and the oak is very present. So yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm afraid my palate is not sophisticated enough to be able to taste and tell you exactly what oak I can taste. I wish I could. All I can tell you is it's toasty. It's big. It's savoury compared to fruit. It's ripe compared to fragrant or fresh. All these different words to compare the two. Masculine, as influenced by the bottle as well, or at least visually, versus feminine for Passel Estate. It's rich and it's robust and it's yummy as well. Now the thing is, having such a contrast and this being so much bigger than the Passel Estate wine, it's probably not a good idea for me to go backwards. I'm tempted. I'd really like to go backwards and taste ours again, but I'm going to lose all the subtleness because I've got this big, powerful wine that I've just been swilling and enjoying, and so that it's really important, guys. I mean, I don't know, Stepan, if you're planning to open a Barossa style later as well, but if you have opened both, maybe put the Passel Estate, close it up, and enjoy the rest of that bottle tomorrow, and finish your Barossa bottle now, because ours, by design, is so much more subtle. You probably lose some of that going back to it after tasting this big boy, and we think about that when we do the Provenance Unearthed as well. We're very thoughtful about how the order in which we present you with the wine. So we actually start the Provenance Unearthed with the Mornington Peninsula Chardonnay, and then we move to the Passel Estate Chardonnay, but then to the Passel Estate Shiraz before we move on to the Barossa Shiraz for these same reasons. So the journey is going from lighter and subtler or leaner, if you like, to bigger, and so that you can really enjoy the progression and enjoy those characteristics that you're tasting in each wine. It's really cool. So yes, 2 bottles. I have indeed got 2 bottles, Stepan. It's true. But and I'm on my own again. I can't wait till next month when I have Barry to help me do these again, and I don't just get tipsy and jabber away at you. So, what else can we talk about? Barry's asked a question actually. What foods would you pair this with? And that's really rich coming from Barry because he's the chef in our house, and he has those kind of answers, not me. Let's talk about food pairings, I suppose, because they're the same varietal, and on one level they will go with their very similar foods. I mean, they're both big alcohol wines. Ours is slightly less than the Barossa. The Barossa that we're drinking here is it's a 14.5%, and ours is just under 14%. So it's, in the world of wines, 0.5 of a percentage. That's a reasonably big difference, and it's typical. The Barossas are typically bigger and more alcohol content than a Syrah or a Rhone or Margaret River style that we have, and as a result. The Barossa is going to go with a whole range of foods, and we've got really good acidity with both of those wines. So they're both going to pair really well with lots of things, and they're both going to pair with similar things. They both have the spice content, as I mentioned. I think this one, the Barossa, is more spicy, cinnamony, spicy, whereas the Passel Estate, I was tasting more sort of white peppers, still spice, but a little bit gentler perhaps, and more on the pepper spectrum rather than spice per se. And so as a result, beautiful, a nice Mediterranean or Eastern lamb dish, a Moroccan lamb casserole perhaps would be really nice with both of these wines. Any Asian food with both these wines. I really love pairing our Shiraz, certainly with a lot of the Singapore noodles that we get here, but I would equally pair very comfortably this Barossa with the similar ones, or even an Indian curry type dish with the Barossa. It's beautiful. But then I guess it might diverge a little bit at the sort of next level down. This Barossa is so big and full-bodied. I mean, it can compare, as I said earlier, for those of you that are honouring International Cabernet Day, this Barossa Shiraz is big enough to hold its own in front of a Cabernet Sauvignon, so I think you could put it with a peppered steak and it'll be really yummy. Whereas our Shiraz, the Passel Estate Shiraz, being more of the Rhone style, subtler style, perhaps is really nice with some of the, a duck or even a roast chicken or a pork. We're not necessarily traditional dishes that you would pair with a red wine, but the Shiraz, our Shiraz, would certainly do very nicely with that. Tuna maybe, and I think on one of these previously when I was talking about our Shiraz or our Syrah, I mentioned a vegetarian salad, a beetroot salad or something like that, really lovely with ours. It may be a little bit lost pairing a beetroot salad with this Barossa Shiraz. But Barry, why don't you tell us in the comments what you would cook? Oh, Stefan's saying venison, definitely, and of course we're across the road from the Margaret River venison farm, so that's a lovely pairing. And both of these will go well with chocolate. Traditionally, Shiraz and chocolate is a nice pairing. And we, of course, besides the Provenance Unearthed, we have the food and wine pairing discovery now at Passel Estate too. So we have a really interesting little bonbon that we pair with our Shiraz, which has all sorts of interesting little flavour notes within it, designed especially to complement and pick out some of these flavours that we're discussing. So that's perhaps if you don't fancy the educational Provenance Unearthed tasting, come in and do a nice food and wine pairing discovery. Either way, you'll get to taste these beautiful wines. So yeah, I think that's what I would pair. Barry, what are you saying? Definitely the spice characteristics of Shiraz go really well with spicy foods. Sure, yes. So absolutely true. What else can we talk about in the context of this Shiraz? It seems that we've mainly got Stepan and Barry in the comments. I don't know, perhaps a few people have put off by tasting a Shiraz on International Cabernet Day, but hopefully we have a few more people out there listening to us. I've got lots of likes and hearts, so that's very nice. There are obviously some people out there listening to us and enjoying this, and of course people can dial in later and have a good watch. The Provenance Unearthed, if you fancy doing this in the context of our offering in the tasting room, you just pop into our website and click book now, and you can go online and book it whenever you fancy it. And actually, what's really nice that we've introduced now that we've got the caravan, I think I mentioned that earlier, is that you can also add our reserve wines to the tasting. So not only do you get to taste our beautiful Shiraz alongside a really nice example, not this one, it's the one we're currently pouring for Provenance Unearthed in the tasting room is a different example from the Barossa, but an equally beautiful, very beautiful example actually from two hands, gnarly dudes. But we also add our Syrah, so that gives you another complexion, if you like, of Shiraz and Syrah. And I guess it might be worth dwelling a little bit on that comparison in the context of this chat today, because with the Passel Estate, they're both the same block even of grapes, and our current releases are both the same vintage as well. So it's again really interesting to see how this grape expresses itself so differently in the context of how we treat it and what we try to make in that sort of stylistic intent. So I mentioned that our core Shiraz, because we're trying to preserve all those beautiful fruit flavours and aromatics that we get by virtue of our slightly cooler climate compared to the Barossa climate, is a whole berry ferment. Well, in the Syrah, we actually take it up another level. We select the best rows of fruit that we can see in the block, and we handpick those very carefully, because we put the whole cluster, the whole grape, not just the whole grape, the whole cluster, stalks and stems and all, into the fermenter. For about 50% of it is whole cluster, and then we put the rest as berries on top and let all that break down. So whilst in our core you've got all those lovely silky tannins coming out of a lovely slow extraction of the berries and the pips and the skins, with the Syrah, the reserve Syrah, you're also adding into that the stalks and all those other flavour components, because it's the whole cluster. And that really does add a whole new level of sort of richness and complexity. And then, we similarly use the French oak and the big puncheons, but we slightly different examples in terms of the choice oak, very slightly longer for the Syrah in those puncheons, and we age it a bit longer in bottle before we release it as well. And as a result, you've got two sisters from the same vintage and the same estate, both very beautiful expressions of the Margaret River and the Passel Estate vineyard, but both quite different. So that's that's quite fun, and so we can add that to the Provenance Unearthed now. Oh, Ruth, hi, you've joined us as well. Ruth, thank you so much, and you love the reserve wines. That's fantastic. Hopefully you've got a Syrah open now, and you can tell us what you think about it. That's great, thank you. I was going to say actually as well to anybody else that fancies recreating this experience at home, if I can put it like that. We don't sell anybody else's wine, of course, so I can't sell you a lovely Barossa, but I can sell you, of course, both of our Shiraz and our Syrah, and I put a little special online, so if you want to go online and order wines from us in Australia or Singapore, for the next couple of weeks, there's a 10% discount on both our Shiraz and our Syrah if you buy it as part of any 6 bottles. And of course, we're still doing 6 free delivery for 6 bottles, both in Singapore and Australia. I've got just one hot tip for you in Singapore. You do need to make sure you've toggled in the webpage to the Singapore shop. We've had a few people, unfortunately, with our new system, tripping over a little bit with the Singapore address in the Australia shop. So just make sure when you're on our webpage that you have clicked onto the Singapore shop, and then this discount will automatically be applied in the next couple of weeks. So you can perhaps invite some friends around, do a lovely lamb dish, and open both a Shiraz and a Syrah and see how that compares. What's Ruth saying? We're good. Oh, you're going to make your next order. I love it. Well, great. Well, you've got a discount if you want some Shiraz and some Syrah. That's wonderful. And I know, Ruth, you're one of our wine club members, so it's really nice to see you on the live stream. Thank you. Really kind. So I don't know if there's anything else anybody would like me to talk about. 25 minutes, as always. I try to keep it under half an hour, especially when it's just me jabbering at you. And it's hopefully quite interesting to see those differences, as I mentioned, and I'm really rather enjoying. I want to go back to the Passel Estate, but it'd be such a waste to do so. I am really rather enjoying this lovely big wine. It makes a change because normally I just drink a lot of Passel Estate, so it's nice to change for me to be drinking something else as well. So guys, unless you have any more questions, maybe I should wrap it up. But thank you very much for joining us again. We will keep this going, and we'll do another one in early October if people are still keen. Barry, I'm sure, will be joining me for that one. I'm sure you're bored out of your minds of it being just me, although I had the lovely Francois from Barossa with me last month. But Barry will join me in the first Thursday in October, and we'll try and think of something really interesting and nice to chat about with you. If you have any requests or suggestions, please send them through, either in the comments box here, or just send me an email, wendy@passelestate.com. And maybe we'll surprise you and do the tasting you've asked for. But anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Stepan. Thank you, Barry, from the other room. And thank you, everybody else, for dialing in and all those lovely hearts and likes. I really appreciate it. And have a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of your wine. Happy International Cabernet Day.